At this moment in time, it feels like every handheld manufacturer is moving towards larger screens, bigger processors, and longer battery life. Yes, that's probably where they'll find a bigger audience, but there's a new handheld on the block that wants to target the pocket-friendly folk who don't need massive amounts of power and instead are looking for something to join them on weekends without breaking the bank. And that handheld is called the Miyoo Mini, a $60 handheld that I actually really love. Here's our review. As mentioned in one of our recent podcast episodes, we spoke about the rise of mini handhelds and how they are increasing in popularity. For example, the Funky S was huge, and so was the RG2 ATV, which was an incredibly popular handheld for beginners. It's as if the developers behind them know that the typical consumer of these types of products are newcomers to the emulation scene, and are adapting them to become more user-friendly, and that's exactly what the Miyoo Mini does. It's so easy to understand that I could give it to my grandmother and she'd be smashing up Goombas in 2 minutes flat. The Miyoo Mini has pointed the niche in the right direction and is ready to let all of its competitors know that they've done it right. For those of you that have been in the handheld scene for some time, you may be familiar with some of Miyoo's work. Many years ago, they previously worked on the BitBoy. This was a very popular handheld back in 2018, and it somewhat kicked off the emulation scene with an affordable handheld for retro gamers. Now, many years on, they're trying to perfect a miniature handheld for those that want to take their retro games on the go for an affordable price. The handheld itself fits perfectly in the hand and is the same size as a packet of cigarettes, making it incredibly pocket friendly with little to no buttons sticking out to cause issues. The face features a sharp, gorgeous, bright 2.8-inch IPS display with a resolution of 640 by 480. The large resolution on such a small screen makes everything feel like you're viewing it in HD, and in fact it's my favourite part about the handheld. The screen is genuinely great, and its 4:3 ratio makes retro gaming even more natural. However, I do need to mention that the screen does have this whitewashed, glowy look to it, which is slightly annoying, but when in games, it's barely noticeable. Below that, you have a big, thick boy D-pad that is a pleasure to play on, and even though it looks a little too big for the handheld, it's actually perfectly sized, and fighting games work a treat on this thing. Then next to that you have your 4 high gloss action buttons, which features the bottom 2 as classic DMG colours, and the same goes for the Shell's grey and the start select buttons alongside the cornered speaker grille. If this colour combo doesn't tickle your fancy, they also have a white with SNES coloured action buttons. Around the sides you'll find your SD card slot, which I might add already comes preloaded because Miyoo doesn't give a fiddle about Nintendo. There's also USB-C charging, a headphone jack located perfectly at the bottom of the handheld, a volume wheel, and your on-off button with LED battery indicators. On the back you will find 4 very small, slightly flared slanted shoulder buttons which have a nice modern soft click to them. These shoulder buttons aren't the best, but they do the job and it adds to the sleek, modern aesthetic to the handheld, all while keeping it slim enough to fit in your pocket without it catching on anything. Then below that is your battery pack, which can be opened again just like the old Game Boy DMG from 1989. Overall, I really like the way the handheld looks and feels. It's a lightweight handheld, one that can be in your pockets without them pulling down your trousers and showing the world you're a Goomba. But then it's also big enough to be comfortable to play on for a couple of hours, especially with that awesome screen and the versatile D-pad. I'll admit, the shoulder buttons do take some time to get used to, but in all honesty, there aren't many games that utilize all 4 of them at the same time, so them being so close shouldn't become a frequent problem at all. Now moving on to the internals, the Miyoo Mini features a 1.2 GHz dual-core processor, 128 MB of RAM, and a 1900 mAh removable battery. On paper, that's pretty pathetic, but in reality, the modern processor actually allows it to power through some large PS1 games, which is very impressive for a handheld of this size. When you turn it on, you will be greeted with the easy to use operating system, and you may be able to see what I mean when the screen is a bit misty. I'm sure that it can be sorted if you like to tinker, potentially lowering the gamma or something like that, but as of now, yeah, it's a little bit annoying, but no handheld is perfect. The stock firmware is pretty basic, but it is easy to understand for newcomers. You have your games, which feature all of your emulators and ROMs. There's RetroArch, which allows you to install your own emulators, and settings for messing around with key mappings and brightness. Look, it's not the best firmware I've used, and I'm sure many of the community will be quick to create something new for it, but for now it's simply okay. Now, what can it actually emulate? After testing everything this handheld has to offer, it's clear to me that it packs a punch for the size, but there were some hiccups along the way that some may take seriously. Some of you may not. For example, it can emulate Game Boy, Mega Drive, Famicom, Neo Geo, Master System, and WonderSwan games very, very well. It all runs fluidly with no problems at all, and they all surprisingly work well on this little device. It's when I started to test PlayStation 1 and Game Boy Advance games that I did notice some very minor issues. For example, the Game Boy Advance emulation was below average. This showed in the frame rates at times, and currently I can't save my games in any of the Game Boy Advance emulators, which to me sounds like a firmware issue that could potentially be updated in the future. And when it comes to PS1 emulation, it's pretty good. The screen works well, so do the button placements, and it feels really cool to play these big games on such an itty bitty device. But I did notice a few crashes over the last 2 weeks when reviewing the handheld. This for me isn't really a deal breaker because I've played on it a lot, so it was somewhat rare, but I know for some of you that can be a big deal breaker when playing PS1 games. Overall though, in terms of emulation, I was impressed, even if it has some places to grow. And that's where I currently am at with the Miyoo Mini. I really like the way this thing looks and feels. It's a handheld that can take bumps and scratches, feels high quality enough to compete with the RG2 ATV, and packs a punch for its size. In terms of hardware, there's literally nothing to complain about apart from the slightly hazy screen, but the firmware is where it lacks the magic. It's very basic, there's no real way to tinker with your emulators, and the odd crash now and then really frustrates me, especially when you're playing Game Boy Advance games that can't save. However, that said, I highly recommend this product for those of you that want a new mini handheld. The firmware will undoubtedly be fixed by the community over the coming months, and when that's happened, it will probably be one of the best mini handhelds on the market, but you might just have to wait a month or two for that to become a reality. For me, the Miyoo Mini is a handheld that I can rely on when I'm doing small trips. For example, if I'm popping on a train to see a friend, if I'm away for the weekend, or if I'm just out and about for a few hours and I need something to play on. This is the handheld that I will be chucking in my back pocket, and that says a lot. Miyoo, I am impressed, you've done a cracking job. Do you need to work on your firmware? Yes. Do you need to work on your customer service? Yes. But as of now, you're doing a cracking job with creating mini handhelds. So there you have it, our review of the Miyoo Mini. If you want to see even more retro handheld content, hit the subscribe button, and I hope to see you in the next video. Peace.